The Who's Been POPCast. I am the entrepreneur who struggles daily to overcome the conformity effects of my education. I believe that nonconformity is probably mistaken as ADHD, and thankfully, conformity was handled physically and not medically back when I was in school. The POP, as in POPCast, is an acronym for all entrepreneurs. The P is for passion, and that is how we attract and inspire others. The O is for obsession, and obsession is the only way you can stay on a constantly moving and often obscure target. And the second P is for perseverance, because the entrepreneur's journey is so darn hard and it's filled with tearful, sleepless nights. All entrepreneurs need to arm themselves with these three unrelenting values. 1, manage your resources so you can have cash flow. 2, follow up so that you can truly appreciate the value others add. And 3, never waver from making everything you touch awesome and impressive. Well, with that said, I'm broadcasting from 399 feet above Austin in a glass house, and it is April 1st. Hopefully not April Fool's Day, but April 1st. And thank you for listening. And next, I like to start every day off with a quote from Calvin Coolidge. It really means a lot to me. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. You know, if I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, and it really means that talent, genius, and education really are something that can hold us back. And that's not what it takes. It takes persistence and determination. That's where the POP and POPcast, I mean, passion, obsession, and perseverance. And those are really, it's how we get accomplishment accomplished. And values, cash flow, follow up. I mean, it's the only way you're really going to be able to appreciate people. You have to follow them up and make sure that they're doing what you need done. And I don't like to think about it like everybody's on a bus, because, you know, you only have one bus driver. Everybody else sitting there looking out the window or talking. You know, maybe we should think about it like a sailboat, or, you know, something along those lines, because everybody on board is probably working in that case. And anyhow, today I wanted to talk about sales, and I wanted to talk about connecting with the customer and relationships. And so the first thing to start thinking about in sales is there's really 3 significant roles in sales. There's the person that has the ability, which is darned hard, to go out and prospect and find new customers, or leads rather. That's to find people and find people that might have some sort of interest in what you're doing, and then do a level of qualification. And then the next person is the person whose role is to maintain the customer. And that is just to give really just awesome service. Never, ever allow the relationship to deteriorate. So relationship is really, really important. And they constantly are looking for opportunities as well. And then the final person is, or role rather, is the person that knows how to ask the questions to actually find the need or help develop the need in the customer. And managing the customer's expectations is so important. And it's like I said on a previous POPcast, was that, you know, managing the expectations is a big deal. Because I think often when we think about customer expectations, we think, well, we just got to tell them how we do stuff. Well, that's not really it. And the customer's not right. The customer is never right, for crying out loud. If you really understand your business and you understand how it connects with people, how could a customer possibly know your business better than you? If the customer knows your business better than you need to start working at it. You have a lot of work to do in front of you. I like to switch the camera around. That is the view out in West Austin. Town Lake is down there. And Mopac, it's a major highway. So 399 feet. I just love it up here. Glass house. It's somewhat of an echo, but eventually I'll be in a padded room. So, and Evelyn today, she's off at the moment. She's going through her terrific twos. She's like starting to figure out how to express herself, and that's about the only thing I can say. She's learning to express herself. And I feel like I'm always playing a game of charades with her, because she just starts screaming. And then I'm like, okay, honey, what do you want? So then we start looking through the refrigerator and we go through a lot of different items. And then eventually she'll nod her head up and down. That means, yes, that's what I want. And then I really feel like I accomplished something at that point. So anyhow, so we have three roles when we start thinking about the customer, when we think about managing the customers, right? When we come into a business. And one is to find new people. One is to manage the people that are already doing business with us. And then the final role is somebody that can really get into managing the customer's expectations about what it is that you do fits in with that customer. And so when we start thinking about that, when you're first starting as the entrepreneur, you're probably all three of those. And then as we get bigger, we can start breaking those roles out, and we can, hire somebody to do the prospecting, for example. And the prospecting could be where you're reaching on the telephone calling people, or the prospecting could be where you're reaching out to people through social media or through writing emails, hopefully brief emails. And hopefully you start off identifying that first sentence when you start writing the first sentence. And actually the first sentence and the PS in letters are the two things that people's, eyesight go to, at least in printed letters. And I imagine emails may or may not be the same way. I think in emails a lot of time, just think about how you look at it on your phone. And you're going to see the subject line and you're going to see the first sentence. And those are really your two chances to pull that person in. So be to the point. Don't waste that opening sentence with, I know you're busy. I mean, I always just think that one's funny. I'm like, why did you waste your opportunity on something so silly? Or you introduce yourself. Hi, this is Ben. Well, I actually respond to that, but I don't know who I am. The more I think about it, the less I really believe I know who I am, huh? I mean, life is just a journey of understanding ourselves. So when we reach out to somebody and we do it through an email, you've got those two. Just think about the hundreds of emails you may be getting every day. And think about the opportunities that are lost everywhere, all over the place. And why are they lost? I don't know. If I had to take a guess, I tend to blame a lot on the conditioning of the way we went through school. I mean, if you think about school, it really promotes long, voluminous writings. I think it pushes that. I mean, I never had a class. I did have one class in college where the professor would make us try and condense down a 20-page report into one page. I remember he said one time, he goes, like we have this English class and we have to write 30 pages and we move the margins in and we double space it and all these things. And I was like, yeah, that's what you do. And he goes, nobody's ever going to read 30 pages of anything you ever write. And that was really it was really a good point. It really was. In this class, we're going to learn how to take 30 pages and narrow that down to a single page. And Now, back then, we used typewriters. And if you don't know what a typewriter is today, then just go online and type it in, or enter it into your browser, and it'll come back and show you what a typewriter looks like. And we used to have like correction fluid back then. And the professor was like, for every single error you have in your writing, you are going to get a letter grade lower. And even if you use correction fluid and correct something, it's a letter grade lower. And of course, I was never a great typist. Last time I counted, I was like at 29 words per minute. And I did get smart though. I used to take my my paper. I would actually type it on just regular, white bond paper, copy paper, we might call it. And I would use correction fluid and make sure everything was perfect on the letter. And then before school every morning, because every day there was another, piece of communication to write for that class, I would show up at this little copy shop where they would charge me 2 cents a page. And I would show up with my own paper. I actually bought this bond paper. And of course, the professor or his assistant's going to hold it up to the light and make sure that you lined it up with the watermark. And so then I would have my page photocopied onto that nice cotton woven page, of course, with the watermark in the correct direction. And so that is how I got through that class. And of course, you weren't allowed to have a mistake. I mean, you had to actually proofread it and make sure that there weren't any mistakes in grammar, because if they caught a grammatical error, that was a letter grade lower for each one. It was kind of harsh, but I'm glad that I went through that experience. I'm really glad that I went through that experience, having to write so much and actually get to the point right off the bat. Like, if you do the research on 30 pages worth of content and now you have to summarize it in a single page, it becomes really hard, especially if you want it to sound good. So anyhow, we look at those 3 roles, and we've got the person that goes out and looks for the leads. We've got the person that is going to manage the people that are already doing business with us and make them feel terrific all the time. And then we've got the person or the role that is what we might call the closer, the person that really knows how to manage the customer's expectations and get the customer's expectations within an alignment of what the organization can and will produce and deliver without any excuses. And, I have this thing about excuses in business. I'm always like, I really don't want to hear the reasons. Please don't take my attention to the reasons. Like, first, let's just experience the mistake, because, diamonds are covered by miles of rock. And I think that the mistakes and the reasons why we did something are just another word for rocks. You want to get to the diamonds, just move that stuff out of the way. Don't put a lot of attention into it unless you feel that you need to investigate the reason. But don't start there, because as soon as you start putting your attention in a direction, that direction has a tendency to start driving us, and our follow-up questions and the follow-up ways that we look at it begin to start focusing on that reason. And one of the things that I've learned in business is that most problems will have a tendency to work themselves out. And also, when there is a mistake with the customer, and it doesn't matter if it's a complete mistake or not, the first place to begin is to overreact with the customer. Just to overreact with them in a more negative way than them. So, like, if they're calling and they're like, hey, I didn't get my order, it doesn't matter whether it was the shipping service or it was you or the way you packaged it, or, I love Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, in the beginning there when he's delivering that package. Obviously, it's not that harsh, but it was really a cute scene. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll have to go look at it. But it was a box that was labeled fragile. And when he delivered it and the guy opened it, it was it was like sand. I think it was glass items that had turned to sand based on the delivery. But, it doesn't matter why the customer didn't get what they needed when they needed it. It doesn't matter where the mistake was. The first thing to do is to diffuse the situation and make the customer feel like they matter. And the easiest way to do that, I think, is to just overreact. I mean, just put yourself in their shoes. It's like, I'm sitting here, I got a class, or I got this, I was planning on having it today. Like, otherwise I wouldn't have had it overnighted. And I was planning on having it today, and now I have to go through, my life is going to be different, right? Like, something's going to be different about my life at this moment. And the last thing that they need to hear at this moment is, well, we sent it out on time, or we did this, or, whatever the situation is. We really need to start by just going more negative. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that we couldn't get this out, that we couldn't get that delivered to you in time. I really apologize for that. Why don't we take some time to take a look at this? Or how about if I give you a call back in a few minutes and I'm going to do some research on this? And then you get back with them, and I'm telling you, you're going to have a person that's going to feel a lot better than just sitting there listening to a reason right off the bat. I just think that a lot of times in business, we just don't understand how to do that. And that's why I'm telling you. That's why I'm telling you right now. And the other thing is that as we're managing relationships with people, is we need to recognize that in an organization that there's a hierarchy. And some things that we never want to do is we never want to pass the buck to another person in the organization, and we never want to pass the buck to the organization itself, and that's done through policy. And so we really want to always keep the communication at the level between you and the customer. And then the next thing that we would do is we would just say, hey, I need some time to think about I need some time to look at this. I wouldn't say think about it necessarily, but I need to do some research on this, and let me get back with you. And you just call them back. You get their phone number. And of course, anytime that you get a phone number, you never make an assumption about it. That's just really, it's a huge mistake. Always read numbers back slowly. Always, always, always. It is so easy to make mistakes. And, if you don't get the phone number right, then either you're going to spend a lot more time researching it. And at the same time, you might say, hey, I think I'm going to be calling you back in 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Are you going to be available? What number are you at? If this number doesn't work, what's another number that I can call you back at? I find that customers really like that. It really empowers them. If you take a number and write it down and don't read it back, you're causing pain to that person. I know it sounds kind of silly, but you really are causing pain to that person. You have harmed that person. I think too often we look at the ways that we harm somebody and we don't really think about the things that really matter. We leave our attention on basically pleasantries, like please and thank you, which they have a place, but that's not what really matters. What really matters is that we provide the need that person had. That's really where the power is. I mean, follow through and doing what you say you're going to do and everything going along with the expectations is really the best form of honor. It's so much more important than the please and thank yous. I mean, really, if you just stop and think about it, if you're going in for brain surgery or something, do you care if the doctor is really, please and thank you? Actually, that does matter a lot. I have read where doctors that have better bedside manners get sued a lot less than doctors that don't. But still, let's go through this scenario and be like, do you want somebody that's really kind, or do you want somebody that is just really focused and excellent at what they do? And they just put all of their attention at being the absolute best brain surgeon. Or do you want somebody that kind of like balances it and they're pretty good at being a brain surgeon and maybe they're not, and they're also really good with their bedside manners? And I know that would make us feel better, but maybe that's not exactly what we want. And that's kind of an exaggeration. But the point is that the kindest way that we can be to other people is following through with what they needed. And a lot of times the other thing is to maintain the relationship between you and the other person and not pass it on by introducing any other person in the organization, whether that person knows them or not. As soon as we start doing that, we end up giving up our authority, and we end up making it so that, we can end up, ending the relationship with the customer. So essentially, if you make a mistake and you're not the top of the organization, you work there, and you make a mistake and you maintain the blame with yourself, then the organization can recover from it a lot easier than if you put the blame on the organization or somebody else within the organization. So if the customer is asking for something and you're not able to do it, and you find out that, you go to your boss and your boss says no, and, we can't do that. And you come back to the customer and you're like, well, I went to the boss and that's just the way it is. I can't do anything about it. My hands are tied. I don't think that's a good way to handle it. I really don't. I really think that anything bad can be turned around in a positive way. You just need some time to think about it and process it. But as long as you keep the problem with yourself and not pass it on to your boss saying, no, I can't do it, you just as easily could say, I've put some research into this and I just don't see another way to do it at this point, right? Now you're maintaining it within you, and you've come back to the customer, and you'd be amazed how often the customer will just be cool with that. Okay, yeah, you checked. I'm cool with that. It's not what I wanted, but, whatever. People don't expect everything. They really don't. Sometimes they just want to get heard. They just want to get heard in an intelligent manner, and you really have the power to do that, so you just keep it with you. And if that customer ended up not wanting to do business with your organization, guess what? Somebody higher up in the organization could actually follow them up and straighten things out a lot easier. It would be a lot easier to get that customer happier again, as long as the issues remained with you. That seems kind of different. But a lot of times we have a tendency that we want to look good with the person that we're dealing with. We want to look like we're the most positive. We're doing everything that we possibly can. But the relationship with the customer needs to be the organization itself and not you as an individual. I know it sounds different, but it really is. Not you as an individual. You as an individual are part of the organization, and your purpose is to protect the organization that you work for. And protecting the organization means that you don't pass the buck to policy or to what other people say or anything like that. Everything always stays with you as the person. So that is kind of how I think about sales. We got three significant roles, right? You got the person that handles going out and finding new people, and the next role is managing the people we're doing business with. And then the other role is the one where we actually manage the expectations, and a lot of times we call that the closer. That's the person that can ask for the orders. And it is kind of important. It's really important because a lot of times people stay on the fence, and you got to get them to just be not dumb. We don't always have to be right. We just have to be not dumb. And so in those, like when it comes to going out and seeking new clients, right? Like as soon as you start hiring other people, you probably need to separate that between inbound and outbound. And why would you need to separate it? Well, you might generate 50 outbound inquiries, right? Before you actually get one person that you can elevate in the organization to start managing expectations and turn them into a customer. Well, if you're answering the phone, you might get 30 people calling in that want the same thing. Like they're already calling in ready to place an order or whatever. So if you don't separate inbound and outbound, all of a sudden you're going to be giving a lot more credit to the people handling the inbound than you are to the people that are really doing the hard work, the real hard work of going out there and finding those deals, finding those people that are going to have, a need for what it is that you produce. It's not easy. It's like, that's why, we never waver from making things awesome to people. Really, when you think about it, one thing that I think we don't give enough credit to in business is the value of the current customer. And it's really easy to start separating that. And, it's like that current customer is really important. I mean, it's a lot less expensive to maintain a customer than it is to go get a new one. Going out to get a new one is really hard. It's hard to find people that are willing to come on and change the things in their world in order to make a decision to do business with you. I mean, they might not even like their current supplier, but they don't know whether or not they're going to have a better experience with you. They really don't. I mean, why would they? That's why, when I first started in the publishing business, and I remember in one of the states, in the state directory, had just gotten into the role, and he placed a rather large order with me. And it's like, even to this day, he's retired now, but even the person, his predecessor, he trained them, and that person's in there. I'm just like, you guys were my first big order. And it's like, it was a risk. It was a risk doing business with somebody new like me. Like, you don't know that I'm actually going to put this product together right. You don't know whether or not the errors that could be in there are in there. You don't know anything until you start doing business with me. And that's when all of a sudden things change. And that's a big reason why people continue to do business with large companies, right? Or companies that have the name recognition. Those companies, you don't get in trouble for continuing to buy from them. But if you take the time to try and buy from somebody new, there's a risk that went in there. And, we don't always see that risk. And so, again, when you're dealing with a customer, the first thing you need to think about all the time, like, if somebody's going to give you the honor of making a complaint to you, accept it. Like, just be quiet and accept it, and write the complaint down if that's what it needs to do. And don't try and answer it right away. Go more negative immediately and get compassionate with that person and accept it. Like, just breathe it in, accept the complaint, and write their phone number down if you have to. I mean, and then read it back to them. I mean, actually following up. I don't know how many times I've contacted people in companies and they tell me they're going to call me back and they don't. Just following up with calling back is a big step. It's kind of huge, because so few people actually follow through with what they say they're going to do. So anyhow, we need to look at the complaints and negativities and things like that as an opportunity. And we need to recognize that, when we're doing business with somebody and we're dealing with them, that the relationship is the organization as a whole. That's where the power of that relationship is. It's not with you. You might be on to a new organization next week, or you might be on to a new role in the organization. But in either case, you need to manage that relationship so that the organization is empowered and looks good. And the way to do that is to always maintain the issues within you. Don't pass the issues on. Now, there's nothing wrong with elevating an account to somebody higher up that might be better to understand the situation and work it through with the customer. There's really nothing wrong with that. In fact, as a customer, a lot of times when you're being elevated, that's a good way to do it. But I will tell you, one time I was at a retailer, and I had this kid started working for me. He was only 17 at the time, and he showed up through a temp agency. He was wearing a tie, and he was in the office, and him and I went to we went out to lunch, and I stopped by an electronics store for something, and I needed to deal with something, and I remembered I I was dealing with the clerk, and the clerk was unable to help me, and I asked for a manager, and the manager, of course, told me no. And we were walking out of the store, and he said to me, he said, well, your mistake was asking for a manager. And I was like, what? He goes, never ask for a manager. He goes, just deal with the clerk. He goes, the clerk's probably making minimum wage, and they're constantly being told to satisfy the customer. He goes, the manager is earning a salary, and they got benefits, and so they're going to stand behind company policy. And sure enough, we drove to another location of that same store, and I let him handle the deal, and he got it all handled, like with the clerk. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I really could not believe that here's a 17-year-old kid teaching me, right? Teaching me about dealing with people, right? Because that's really what it is. You're dealing with another person. So when we're in sales, or we're actually in any role in an organization, when we're dealing with a customer, I guarantee we're in sales at that moment, even though we don't think ourselves as a salesperson, but we're in sales. And sales is a rather broad area. It has names like customer service, and it has names like telemarketer, and it has all kinds of names. But if you're dealing with a customer in any way, you're in sales. Marketing is sales. It's all the purpose is to get people to buy our service, and all products are a service in the long run when you think about it. So we're getting people to buy our service and to feel good about it. That's really what matters. I mean, always you want people to feel good about doing business with you. I mean, that really is the highest form of honor, is somebody to make the decision to do business with you. So keep the issues with yourself. If you can, there's nothing wrong with elevating it, but don't make excuses to the customer. When the customer has a problem, just take a deep breath and go a little bit more negative than the customer. Become compassionate and understanding for that person. I remember one time, I remembered saying to someone, I said, please give me some compassion. The only mistake I made was making the decision to buy from you guys. I know that was kind of harsh, but I mean, it was like, gosh, I have these expectations that people treat you with respect, right? Like when you buy from them, and respect isn't just please and thank you. That feels good, but it doesn't feel as good as actually delivering what you agreed to deliver when I made the purchase. And maybe you didn't agree to it, but if that was my expectation, then that's kind of like your thing, like don't let me walk away with the expectation that is not yours, right? Like this is your opportunity to be awesome. Manage expectations of the customer. We'll talk a lot more about that in the future, but definitely as an entrepreneur, we have got to get people into the organization, and we got to make sure that our people treat them with the utmost respect. And the utmost respect is to make sure they're not passing the buck or talking about policies. So, well, this is 33 minutes, and we're right at 30 seconds. You know how much I like 3, and it's 333 at whosbeen.com if you want to write me an email.